In the geoengineering mix, these are nanoplastic particles that are spiked with aluminum, with titanium, with strontium. Basically, the oceans are covered with a sheet of plastic. The oceans can no longer evaporate the water that the atmosphere needs to keep the earth blue and green like it used to be. The algae in the ocean depend on a lot of sunlight in order to produce oxygen. And they can't do their job anymore because they're not getting the light they need. In the last 2 or 3 years, ever increasing articles about nanoplastics appearing in chicken, in fruit, in vegetables, and also in our human body. Every animal that we eat now is full of these nanoplastic particles. And these are certainly not animals that have swum in the ocean. These are land-based animals. They've never eaten a plastic bag, yet they're accumulating these nanoparticles. And the only possible source of that is the air that they breathe.
At this late hour on our planet, when we most need alternative forms of energy, climate engineering is dramatically diminishing all three primary forms of alternative energy. Climate engineering is disrupting the hydrological cycle, i.e. the rain cycle, causing protracted droughts all over the world, which is dramatically reducing hydropower production. Climate engineering, by its very description, solar radiation management to block the sun, greatly diminishes solar power output all over the world. Climate engineering also reduces wind power because it reduces convection. Atmospheric layers of reflective particles reduce convection, which in turn reduces wind, which reduces evaporation, again decreasing potential power output for all other forms of energy. Many are absolutely overwhelmed when they are introduced to the climate engineering issue. They try to convince themselves that our government would never do this to us. But such a conclusion doesn't hold up to available data. All official air testing agencies generally test for 10 microns, 2.5 microns at best. Atmospheric testing has proven that climate engineering aerosols are unimaginably smaller, in the 20 to 100 nanometer range. The smaller the particle, the more deadly it is to inhale. Available science studies prove that human hearts and human brains now have not just millions, but billions of nanoparticles lodged in them. Most know that bee colonies are collapsing. What most don't know is that insect populations in general are also collapsing all over the world. Bees are dying of symptoms resembling Alzheimer's and dementia in human beings because they're packed full of aluminum. Why aren't the beekeepers acknowledging this? Why isn't this fact a headline all over the globe?
To suit our convenience, we clear other large areas of natural life in order to build towns and cities. Our homes, stores, and factories, clustered closely together, are easy marks continually tempting invasion by the insect enemies. Our only answer is to wage constant battle with the bugs. This must be intelligent, organized, well-planned warfare. We must fight our insect enemies with every weapon our imagination and science can devise. Chemical warfare is quick death to our enemies, whether used on a small scale or on a large scale. Vast areas can be treated in a short time, an outstanding advantage in our warfare against the insects.
What's it like for an insect to be poisoned by a crop-dusting aircraft? Don't we all know? Is there any difference whatsoever between crop-dusting insects and the global climate engineering spray operations that have long since contaminated our entire planet and every breath we take? How can we avoid this? Answer, we can't.
You can make very high quality, and do this in just a jet in a very simple way, make high quality aluminum particles just by spraying aluminum vapor out, which oxidizes. And implementation decisions will be risk-to-risk decisions. The risk of doing it against the risk of not doing it.
It's very good to have research on new applications of technology that are beneficial, but it should be balanced at the same time it's developed with the study of the adverse effects, if there are any.
Now, as it happens, the Air Force conducted a study starting in 1993. It was called In Vitro Toxicity of Aluminum Nanoparticles in Rat alveolar macrophages. That's a real fancy way of saying testing the effect of aluminum nanoparticles on the white blood cells in the little air sacs in your lung, the alveoli. And what they found in this 8-year study was that these particles, when you're exposed to them long enough, it suppresses the ability of your white blood cells to defend you from airborne infections coming into your lungs. And so essentially by breathing this material in, your immune system is dramatically suppressed.
If we can't breathe, if we can't inhale without sucking up highly toxic, bioavailable, bioaccumulative particulates that lodge in our systems like a plaque, elements like aluminum, barium, strontium, elements that are highly toxic in and of themselves, but when combined, become exponentially more toxic.
70% of nanoparticles that are already within us are introduced to our systems through just respiration. So we breathe them into our nose, the ethmoidal sinuses then collect them, they can migrate to our frontal lobe through the olfactory nerve, and there they can generate reactive oxygen species and cause brain damages of different type.
Everything we know at present suggests that generation of reactive oxygen species is the cause of aging, cause of almost every disease that we know. Certainly dementia, but other diseases as well. A lot of the nanoparticles, not all of them, but a lot of them have metal ions. Metal ions are potent generators of reactive oxygen species. When you have nanoparticles in the body, they are small enough so they go everywhere. There's no barrier to them in any part of the body. They cross the blood-brain barrier, they cross cell membranes.
They're even more reactive or can be more damaging than virus particles. We have natural defenses against viruses. We have no natural defenses against nanomaterials. And again, they never leave our system. They don't die, they're not cleared. We don't produce antibodies against them. So we are exposing humanity to a class of materials that will continue to damage biological tissue for the lifetime of that organism.
The Japanese developed a blood washing method called apheresis that was used for reducing cholesterol and fats from the blood. And then a brilliant German toxicologist came along and modified this procedure where he could not only wash out the blood, but also the plasma from the connective tissue, which is a much deeper look into the system. The entire blood volume and plasma volume is put through a filter system several times and filters out anything that's toxic. And with this method, it's the first time you can actually measure body burden, or how much is in the entire body. And as it turns out, nanonized aluminum is by a factor of roughly 100 times, 94 to 120 times more prevalent than any other toxin, nanonized aluminum. And we know that we absorb aluminum very poorly by eating it. That cannot be the possible route how we get toxic. The only way that we can get these high levels of aluminum is through inhalation or through injection. This was a big wake-up call.
To let the evolvement of a program impact my grandchildren, even my children, not necessarily the immediate years for myself, is a very personal concern to know how it will flow down through the elements of the family.
I often find that those who question actions of the government often don't want to get involved until it directly affects them. If you look up into the sky, this is directly affecting you. If you have a family, your children, your wife, your husband, your extended family members, your animals, this is directly affecting all of us.
How can so many claim that governments and militaries around the world would not spray chemical and biological agents on populations when there are literally hundreds of historically documented cases of such operations occurring in recent decades? Many biological warfare experiments were officially used to test the range and dispersal patterns of aerosol, particulates, and biological agents. In the United States alone, by 1977, 239 open-air biological tests had been conducted over unknowing U.S. populations. Tests were conducted throughout the 20th century, many of which took place concurrently with the covert ramp-up of climate engineering operations. We are expected to believe that this experimentation was benign and not connected to the climate engineering operations, just as is the case with the ever-increasing exposure to microwave transmissions all over the world. Many of what we are told are only cellular communication towers have power supply inputs that are 10 times larger than what is needed for communications purposes. The compounding synergistic toxicity of these operations is accumulating inside all of us.
What makes us sensitive to Wi-Fi and to the electromagnetic radiation in general is the metals in our body. And we never used to have aluminum in our mitochondria. The aluminum in our mitochondria makes the inside of the mitochondria resonant with Wi-Fi, and they start heating up, and it starts destroying the mitochondrial DNA at a very, very rapid rate. And so it's really the synergy of the metals dispersed in our body and the Wi-Fi making our body a resonant antenna with the Wi-Fi environment. And of course, we're going now from 3 or 4G to 5G with the ever increasing amplitude of energy that's delivered into our systems.
This is one of those life or death choices. But we're not just talking about my life or your life. We're talking about something that is killing the fundamental living system on the planet.
We are bathed now in a soup that is comprised of nanoized aluminum. Glyphosate forms 6 different salts with aluminum and works as a carrier to carry the aluminum deep into our brains. And the only other missing thing there was to open the cell walls, open the blood-brain barrier, is the ever-increasing exposure to radio waves. Half of the people listening to this talk will die with or of dementia. And the main cause of dementia is the nanoized aluminum particles. There's somebody behind the scene orchestrating that with the perfect understanding of the human condition and of toxicology, and brought the 3 things together that will, in a very, very rapid period of time, we're talking 6-7 years from here on, cause major destruction of the human nervous system that could be stopped at a switch. We could have a clean world tomorrow.
We need to come together for all of humanity to address this issue. And I think that the only way to do that at this point is a legal approach and to present all evidence on both sides, the evidence that we are collecting as independent scientists and the evidence that already exists in those laboratories where these materials are produced and deployed. Colleagues of mine, they don't really accept this yet. They're starting to, because I've shared some of the data that we've collected, but most of them will ignore it and do call it beat-up conspiracy theories. Well, those learned people are ignorant of the facts. And so my call to action is don't ignore things anymore. We have to address this issue. It's on our doorstep, it's in our skies, it's in our children. We have to do something.
If the ongoing global climate engineering weather warfare operations are not brought to light and to a halt, allowing the planet to respond to the damage done, it will never be able to find a new equilibrium, an equilibrium that may yet allow it to sustain life into the future. Exposing and halting climate engineering operations is the great imperative. They are disrupting virtually the entire web of life.
I think we need to enlist the support of commercial airline pilots, as well as calling back and bringing these subjects up with our House and Senate members in the U.S. Congress. I think it's going to take that kind of action to get this geoengineering exposed, find out what's behind it, and why they are doing this.
In my life, I have friends, family, wonderful people who are trying to stay within the official reality on the theory that they'll be safer. And the reality is, if you look at where this thing is going, you know, better we deal with it now. It's like cancer, it's only going to get worse.
The data is what's going to change people's mind. So you need to be able to draw it out, get the reports available, and get publicity on what the conclusions are so that people believe it. It's not just someone raising a subject that has no validity. It's based on scientific data that demands changes.
We've gotten to the point where the mystery is so expensive, spiritually, psychologically, financially, legally, you know, that the time has come to say is, you know, who's really doing this and why are they behaving this way?
And I often wonder, do any of those people, you know, behind the scenes fearing reprisal, are they looking into this? There is data out there. Who's going to bring it forward?
We are rapidly running out of time to take care of this problem. That's what makes it so critical. Yeah, and I can only hope that in my lifetime, we'll have a resolution of this and we can fix it. I'd really like to see the planet stay, the life on the planet stay anyway.
How do we stop climate engineering? I'm asked this question so often. The only way forward in this fight, the only way we can expose and halt climate engineering is from the inside out. With a critical mass of awareness, a level of awareness so vast that it causes a shockwave around the world, so that populations all over the world know what their governments have done to them without their knowledge or consent. A level of awareness so vast that our military brothers and sisters and their families understand what they are really a part of, literally self-extermination. We must reach a critical mass of awareness. It is the only way we can expose and halt climate engineering processes, and this effort will take all of us.
You cannot change anything when you are dead. When you are dead, it's all is gone. So as long as you are alive, do something, I would say.
I do trust human ingenuity and human intelligence, and I think we still have a chance, but things are far more serious than the general public is aware of. The song is going to be over very soon if you don't turn things around.
We have a system full of great pain and great suffering and great poverty, and, you know, people sort of walking around in the dark playing bumper cars. It doesn't have to be. And so part of what has me so optimistic is I know what's possible. I know that what we have now is tiny compared to what's possible. So now's the time to figure out what's going on and why.
Now, our only chance is to stop interfering with Earth's life support systems, to expose and halt climate engineering once and for all, allow the planet to respond to the damage done to it on its own. Climate engineering is not a cure. Climate engineering is a curse, even worse than the disease it claims to treat. Time is not on our side. The sand in the hourglass is running out at blinding speed. Please, make your voice heard. Make every day count. Please forgive me if I ran for a moment on the memories from my former life, my life before the last 20 years of my desperate attempt to sound the alarm. I spent so much time on or near the ocean. I got my scuba certification at age 14. Being below the waves was always an escape to another world. A world that still made sense. A world in which I often felt I wanted to remain. And I feel so fortunate to have seen and experienced life below the surface of the sea in numerous parts of the world. In the waters off New Zealand, Australia, in the South Seas, Fiji, the most remote locations in the Sea of Cortez, the Gulf of California. But the vast majority of my diving sabbaticals were around all the shores of the Channel Islands, off the coast of California. And how incredibly miraculous and thriving were the once expansive kelp forests there. I would meander in total solitude through these mystical undersea landscapes that were teeming with life. When the water clarity was at its best, the visibility could be well over 100 feet, and on such days, stunningly beautiful beams of sunlight would glisten down through the kelp stalks, rising up from so far below me. It was like being in the canopy of a long-lost medieval forest. Weaving my way through the massive kelp stalks in total silence, I felt like a wild and free bird flying through an untouched and unspoiled paradise of unimaginable beauty. So many species, all playing their individual part in the miraculous web of life. Seals, making their way through the kelp, would often alter their course, and they would swim up to me and stare right into my mask, directly into my eyes. They were curious. Many of my memories from the kelp forests now seem a very distant dream from another life. Moments that I knew, even while they were occurring, were slipping away. It was beautiful. It was nature. A part of the living ocean. A part of the web of life on which our lives depend. I had to leave that life. There was a constant calling of conscience inside me. I felt there was much I had to do, that there was a long journey before me, yet to be traveled. The deepest and most untraveled wilderness has always been my sanctuary, and when I trek there alone and in solitude, I feel most connected to the whole. I marvel at the complexity and the miraculousness of life, the countless forms of it. I try to contemplate the endless and seemingly impossible factors that were necessary for life to exist and flourish on this spinning ball of rock in the harsh and hostile environment of space. A ball of rock with its own magnetic shield, with its own moon that stabilizes its orbit, that orbits a life-giving star at just the right distance, with miraculous atmospheric layers that, for unimaginably long spans of time, have facilitated countless forms of life. How wondrous it all is, each part. A dragonfly, a tree, a bird, a whale, the sunrise, millions of tons of water magically floating through the sky in the form of spellbindingly beautiful clouds, bringing life-giving rain. When I witness the destruction of this miraculous web of life, I can only think of returning to the front line of the battle to sound the alarm. Reaching a critical mass of awareness in the population is the only way forward in this fight. The challenges we face are immense. The odds are against us. But as the proverb goes, it's not over till it's over. Any one of us could be the final pebble that triggers the landslide of awakening.